Here's a question that's lighting up LinkedIn right now. Is AI secretly rejecting your job applications before any human even sees your resume? Some recruiters are saying, absolutely not. We look at every single application. Others are saying, wake up, it's been happening for years. And honestly, they're both right. I'm Ryan, and this is the future of work with AI. I'm back with Stephen Rothberg, founder of College Recruiter, and one of the few people who's been watching HR tech evolve for decades. Stephen's been to every HR tech conference, he knows what's really being sold behind those booths, and he's not afraid to call out what's actually happening versus what vendors are claiming. Here's what we're diving into. Why the AI screening debate is missing the point, the real reason Amazon scrapped their hiring AI, and why Stephen thinks we're heading towards something we've never seen before. High business profits and high unemployment happening at the same time. If you've ever wondered whether that instant rejection email at 1:01 a.m. was from a human or a machine, or if you're an HR person trying to figure out what's actually happening with these systems you're buying, this conversation is going to open your eyes. Fair warning, we get into some uncomfortable truths about bias, both human and artificial, but that's exactly why this conversation matters. Let's jump in.
Today, I would love to talk about AI and screening, since it
Yeah.
seems to be all the rage on LinkedIn right now.
Yeah. There are a lot of opinions on LinkedIn about AI and screening. Some of them are true.
I think they're all true at some level in some case.
Bingo. Thank you. And
Yeah,
and
and that
that's
that really, I think that really is, and so I think we can go like, I want to stay heavy on the HR side,
okay.
right? But I think that if you take all of recruiting, literally all of it, everything about it, and you think about all the complaints and all the stories from job seekers, probably a high percentage of them are true. And
Yes.
you look at all the defense on the other side from HR people and recruiters and all those things, all of their defenses probably are true, because the answer is it's complicated. Like, there is no de facto standard for how ATSs work. Period. They're just
Yeah, I think what you're saying, Ryan, is really important that my words, not yours. It's true in their own experiences. If a job seeker applies at 1 in the morning and they get a rejection email at 1:01 a.m., right? Maybe it's AI, maybe it's knockout questions. Probably it's knockout questions, but there are definitely organizations that are using AI to evaluate match. If you get below a certain score, we're going to reject you, we're going to move on. I've seen recruiter after recruiter saying it's absolutely not true because they don't do it.
right.
And I think what we're saying here is it's not true in your environment. It's not true for you, for your company. But that doesn't mean that that's not true for every other company.
Right. And I think if we zoom out, because I'm going to assume that if you're listening to this and you're in HR, I assume you're smarter than everybody else from an HR standpoint, but just for those who maybe feel like they're out of their depth, AI, artificial intelligence, by definition, is any computerized system that does something on its own. So if you use the Myers-Briggs, if you use the DISC, any assessment out there, you answer a set of questions, and then a artificial intelligence, not a human, grades it and comes up with a score. That is quote unquote AI. Therefore, job knockout questions are AI. It is an artificial intelligence by definition from the MIT course I went through. Now, today's AI that we're thinking of is generative AI, and in that it means we feed it fuzzy information and it makes decisions in that fuzzy information, meaning the difference between, hey, here is, let's say a resume, which a lot of people think, okay, there's these resumes and there's some AI that looks at it and looks at the words in it and compares it against the job description and gives me a score. Okay, that AI has existed since Google. What do you think Google
Mhm.
was doing? Google was reading a website, extracting keywords, counting them up, looking at not just plain quantity of keywords, but oh, if a keyword is bold or if keywords a heading in a bigger font, it's more important than other keywords. And
Closer to the top of
comparing
the
it. Yeah,
document. Yeah.
that's just an algorithm.
Yeah.
That is an algorithm is artificial intelligence. And so that idea of, hey, we scanned it, look for a number of keywords, scanned against the job description, look for a number of keywords there, decided how to rank those resumes. I know for a fact is out there in some systems. I think it's dumb. I think it's dumb not because a human's not looking at it. I think it's dumb because you're comparing English to Spanish. A job description and a resume are not the same thing. So comparing and grading one against the other, you'd be better off grading against the resumes of your top 3 employees for that job because that's English and English. But the job description was written by a lawyer. There's no prioritization. The words and phrases used in that are internal speak, internal lingo. A resume is external speak. So it's just a bad comparison anyway. But that concept of AI, that actually is still artificial intelligence that is doing something, coming up with something. It may just be an algorithm. But today's AI that we want to throw it at is like, hey, I threw this into ChatGPT. It went into the unexplainable black box of decision making that can't even tell you why it decided it got a 50%, but it got a 50%. And that's what everybody's
Mhm.
afraid of and thinks is happening. And on the flip side, people are saying it's not happening. Well, HR Tech's in 3 weeks, and I can tell you that place is loaded with people who are building the exact technology that we're talking about. Like exact technology. I've seen it because um, ATS systems that will go unnamed have implemented it as an add-on feature to auto screen and rank your candidates.
Yeah, basically all the leading ones. I do think it's important to note that there are a lot of different definitions of artificial intelligence, and some of the key people, the founding fathers, if you will, in AI have changed their definition over time. Yours is one. I think we can have a reasonable people can differ about whether that technology is actually AI or not. I don't think it really matters if code is JavaScript or HTML. It's what it does for you. So if this is machine learning and not AI, if this is just traditional if then type statements, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter either to the recruiter or to the candidate. It's the result that it generates.
100%.
And I think your reference to HR tech is great because I guarantee you a huge selling feature for any ATS, which is kind of who dominates that show, is their scoring, ranking, grading, different ATS and different systems call it different things. But at the end of the day, what they're saying to the recruiter is, the ATS, think that Cindy is better qualified than Emily, who's better qualified than Ryan, who's better qualified than Stephen. In fact, I'm way down at the bottom. And it's possible that's true. But like you said, Ryan, it's the documents that you're using to make that judgment are terrible. The way I describe it is that resumes or CVs are backward-looking documents. They document, they create alibis. This is another way of describing it for what you've done, where you've been. Some candidates can have 30 or 40 years of stuff there. I've seen people who are like in their 60s who still have teenage babysitting jobs on their resumes because they think if they don't, employers are going to see a gap in their employment history. And if their employment history is from 1957, I don't think employers care. On the flip side, though, you've got the job posting, and that's a forward looking document. Inherently, this is what
Right.
we want you to do. In our space, where College Recruiter lives, early career, the job posting is fine. It's no different, really, than a job posting for a position that requires 5 or 10 years of experience. It looks the same, it kind of reads the same, the qualifications might be different, but the resumes are completely different. If you're a typical 20-year-old, like, what career related experience can any employer or AI system expect you to have? And so then they start looking at things like, what school did you go to? And what's your major? Two incredibly poor predictors of productivity. And
100%.
and I think that recruiters, like almost everybody, are intimidated by technology. They think that because the AI tells them that the world is flat, that it must be flat. And they sort of abdicate that decision to the tech. I see recruiters all the time saying, oh no, even though our system ranks and scores and whatever, I look at every single resume. The AI is not rejecting candidates. And I have no doubt for those recruiters, that's true. But you can't tell me, Ryan, if you're hiring 50 people in the next 3 weeks for the same role, and you've got 10,000 applicants, there is no way that a human being is looking at all 10,000. And so if the AI ranks me so low that I never get interviewed and I never therefore get hired, didn't the AI effectively reject me?
Yeah. And I think, yeah, no, 100%. And I think the argument over, is this how it works? Is it not how it works? All that stuff. It's really easy. The answer is, it's complicated.
Yeah.
Okay. You have, I don't know, somewhere around 100 at least major ATS systems out there, used by a million different people who all think they know how to do this stuff. And by definition, when we built a lot of these tools, we built them to be customizable, which
Hmm.
means just because you log in to Applicant Pro and you see job questions and you say, no, I would only create these questions to be knockout questions if they really were knockout questions, you may not even know that you don't have toggled on the field where you can assign a weight to it and create scoring. And
Mm.
you may not, you have zero capability to say that the next person in line's not like, hey, like, I should ask him this random question because in my magic genie heart, I believe it's a predictor of whether you'll be successful in this job or not, because you literally have 50,000 users who are all doing everything however they want. And that's where the argument, and if you get to that argument, the reason why nobody likes it is like, that sucks. That's a bad answer. It's think about it, you're like, my number one way that I answer almost every question anybody asks me is, I don't know, it depends. It
Yeah.
depends. Let me ask you some more follow-up questions. Or I don't know, it depends. Does this even matter? Like, if you want to argue whether AI is being used or not, let me give you the answer. In the next 5 years, it will be, because job seekers and job boards are applying for 5 to 10 times more jobs than they had in the past. And according to yesterday, the unemployment rate is going up, which means we're going to have more applicants. And that means that per job, you're going to go from 10 or 20 or 50 to 500 people applying for jobs. And on the flip side of the spectrum, we underfund and understaff HR all day long.
Hmm.
So you have one corporate HR person, and she's not a recruiter. She doesn't get paid for placing somebody. She gets
Right.
paid a salary. She gets paid the same money whether she's recruiting for 5 jobs or 50 jobs. She gets paid that money until she cries or quits and they finally give her somebody else because they have decided that it is scaled, or they give her tools, because a tool like ChatGPT is significantly cheaper than an assistant. And
Hmm.
newest, flashiest AI tool that, like, people can say whatever they want, but anybody going to HR tech is not in, like, the few HR people who are actually at HR tech, because it's not that kind of show. This is
Right.
a show so that everybody who hasn't been there understands. And you've been to HR tech, I'm assuming, Steven.
I have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
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 the
a it well, I won't steal your thunder. I
it's
think I
the
know where you're
non-SHRM
going.
show. This is where all the tech people show up and the VCs show up
Yep.
and M&A guys show up and the analysts show up, and they put out there what the future is going to look like and they fund that future. And I can tell you the current future in HR tech is enabling one person to do the job of five. Sorry, That is the future. And that's also the future in accounting tech and in sales tech and in marketing tech, because like it or not, that's the promise that's being made by AI. One person doing the job of five, period.
Yeah, I've heard HR tech described as the V and V show, like vendor and venture.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing
100%.
wrong with that, right? It's a highly successful show. It's been highly successful forever. I guess it should actually be the VVNV show because it's also in Vegas every year.
100%.
But when I've gone, absolutely, they are TA people there.
Yeah.
But you're right. They're the exception, not the rule. I suspect it's something like 20 to 30%
Yeah,
of the attendees are
100%.
HR, and they tend to be HRIS people. They tend to be senior VPs of TA at really large companies that maybe have been, maybe they're a Workday customer and they're looking for something new, or they're looking to compare Workday to several other alternatives. And a great way of essentially doing that is to walk from booth to booth to booth, rather than stringing out the process. So I think it's a great opportunity, but if you walk up to any one of those booths and dozens of others with related systems, assessments, et cetera, a selling feature absolutely is the ranking, scoring, matching software. And in a high volume hiring environment, that software is effectively rejecting candidates. If you're hiring 4 people a year and you get 300 applications a year, then probably you're not relying on the AI to reject candidates. But if there is AI in that process, it probably is steering you to certain candidates and steering you away from others. If the AI says you just got 38 applicants and you're going to sit down and look at them and it ranks them from best to worst, it creates a bias right off the top. That candidate who comes at the top of the search results clearly has a better opportunity to get hired, is more likely to get hired than the candidate at the bottom, even if there's a human looking at each of them. And let's just acknowledge that. I, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say we should ban this software, but I just think we have to be honest about what it does and what it doesn't do and for who.
Right. Well, and on the HR side of things, like HR has been up to this point late adopting users of technology, not builders of technology, not even that much investigators of technology. When they're looking at a technology, a piece of tech like the ATS, they're not going like, I want to know how all this stuff works. I want to get my hand in there and mess with it. The average ATS user is probably using half of its capabilities anyway. Like
Sure.
literally, they're not the TA people who might show up at HR Tech. I believe you'd also find are more sophisticated and earlier adopters. They're
100%.
different than the ones that will be showing up at Utah SHRM that are your normal run of the mill HR folks. A, because it costs so much money just to get in that place and you're having to travel to it. But B,
Hmm.
like the average HR person is not somebody who shows up at a technology show and says, tell me how it all works. I want to play with it. Like,
Right.
that's not they're overwhelmed with the normal stuff of
Hmm.
payroll and all those things. But I think that that's also where the problem lies,
Hmm.
especially entering where we're going next. Because where we're going next is a massive increase in applicants per job.
Yeah.
And secondly, what you brought up about college hiring, I think we're going to see that blend into other jobs. And the key thing with college hiring is like you haven't done the job we're hiring for you. We're comparing oranges to apples of like how you did in school. Just so everybody knows, there's a lot of really brilliant, outside the box, innovative people who don't do well in college because it bores them to tears. And because, going back to our original premise, they don't believe that the world can be boiled down to a right and wrong answer. Like
Hmm.
people like me by default sit in class and go, okay, either if there is only one right answer, that's memorization and that's boring.
Hmm.
But if you're going to ask a question where there isn't a right answer, but you want to confine me into it, I'm going to by default argue the opposite, not because it's my opinion, but because somebody in the world needs to say, hey, there's more ways to think about this, which causes you problems from teachers. It causes you problems with grades. It makes you a contrarian, also known as divisive,
Hmm.
because contrarian is a really nice way to say divisive, right? Um, but that's who you are. But then you
One,
get out
one is said with a smile, the other
yeah,
is said with a scowl.
100%. But when you get out in the real world, that outside the box thinking will end up being rewarded, especially in a hyper chaotic evolutionary environment where the world's changing around us. But so if you take that and you go, okay, that's where colleges are at. And so we might use a behavioral assessment, a personality assessment, like I don't actually want to know your GPA. I want you to take the preview and I want to see your cognitive scores on how fast of a learner you are with a timed thing on it. Because there's a lot of people who get good grades that struggle at taking tests when there's a timer on them and pressure.
Hmm.
And I feel for you
Hmm.
and they say this isn't what the real world's like, well, come work in a tech company. It's 100% what the real world looks like. Timer, constraints, difficult problems to solve. Go. Like huge pressure. But I think when you start taking, let's just take an easy position, let's say recruiting, and you say this job's about to change, it's possible that your historical resume no longer says you have the skills of what the future job looks like. So now how are
Right.
we going to decide?
Yeah, it's so much of hiring is arbitrary, and candidates rarely appreciate that, especially those who are earlier in their careers and haven't like come across it as much as those of us who are later in our careers, where it's like, oh, okay, been there, done that 20 times. The other thing is that we use a lot of proxies in hiring. If Ryan went to this school, then that's a really good school, and therefore he's a better candidate than Stephen, who went to a lesser school. Maybe so. Do you have any data to back that up? Um, I was in a fascinating conversation maybe 6 months ago with a talent acquisition data analytics guy.
Mhm.
And he made the point that employers don't have the data to be able to show that a candidate with one set of credentials is better than a candidate with another because we never hire both. We always only hire one. And even if it is like, say, a high volume environment and you're hiring a lot of people and you do what Amazon has done, which is deliberately hire people from outside of their profile to kind of serve as a check, is
Mhm.
that profile actually valid? The problem is the candidates know what their profile is. They know how it ranks against the job posting. So does the recruiter, so does the hiring manager. So, in the world of science, if you're designing a drug to save people with certain kinds of cancer, right? Double blind is incredibly important.
Right.
Half of the people get a placebo, and neither they nor the people administering it know that it's a placebo, and the other half get the real drug, right? That second group may all of a sudden grow tails, and that's a bad
Right.
outcome, right? And so you
Right.
stop the trial, but usually it goes all the way through. Then you look at the data, you see which results are better, and you follow the data. The nature of employment prevents us from doing that. We cannot look back and say, this group of candidates was better than this other group. And so a lot of it just boils down to intuition. LLMs use essentially intuition to guess at the next word, the next
Mhm.
phrase. But that's not the same as guessing whether Ryan is likely to be more productive than Steven in this job. LLMs were not designed to rank, to score, to grade. But if you look under the hood at a lot of the hiring systems, that's exactly what they're doing. And if I may, I want to touch on something you said a couple minutes ago, before you and I kind of like went off on a rant, if you will, a
Right.
scout. We no scowls though, smiles. Um, But you touched on something that I think is massively important, and that is the AI systems cannot accurately tell you how they're reaching decisions. Anthropic, the makers of Claude, talked about this months ago, where they basically ask Claude, how did you arrive at that decision? Why did you choose that word? Why did you choose that document to base that paragraph off? And Claude would give back a very certain definitive answer. And it often was not correct. It
Yeah.
was it was guessing as to why it reached an answer. It kind of be like me saying to you, Ryan, 2 weeks ago, do you remember that day where it was sunny in the morning and it was raining in the afternoon and there was a big windstorm and your trash can got knocked over? What did you have for lunch that day? You're gonna probably remember the day, you'll have some memories, and you'll be like, I think it was a grilled cheese. Yes, absolutely. It was grilled cheese. You're sure of it, you're not trying to mislead me, and you're wrong.
Hmm.
It's just you're trying to kind of piece things together. What would have made sense? I like grilled cheese. It was cold. I think I had a grilled cheese. Yeah, that makes sense. Grilled cheese. And that's what a lot of the LLMs do, that when they're trying to piece together how they reach decisions. So if you're an employer, right, and OFCCP comes knocking on your door and says, why did you hire that person instead of that person? And you go to your LLM based hiring system and you say, hey, why did you rank that candidate higher than the other one? It's probably going to give you an answer. And that answer is going to make sense. And maybe it's accurate.
Right. But I want to unpack a couple of things there because there's some 100% true. On the flip side, if OFCCP went to you today and said, why did you rank this candidate over this candidate? You know what the answer is going to be today without the LLM? All of those biases you brought up about the fact, well, he went to a major college, and
Yeah.
according to it's interesting because bias gets a bad word name, okay? Because when we think of bias, we think of negative bias, meaning like you have a bias, an unfair assumption is classified as bias. But
Yes.
saying that somebody went to Harvard is better than somebody who went to State College of Southern Utah is also a bias.
Hmm.
It's just a widely accepted and not disputed bias. It doesn't mean there's data to back it up. There's societal acceptance to back it up. Somebody with 5 years of sales experience is better than somebody with two. That is a societally accepted, cannot be disputed, but actually wrong
Yeah.
because they could have sucked for 5 years. And selling couches is not the same as selling cars and is not the same as selling software. And selling to enterprise is not the same as selling to, like, because we're back to it depends. But my favorite part, I love that you brought up the double blind study because so I probably one of my most referenced, same examples as yours for a completely different reason. The number
Hmm.
one thing that the pharmaceutical world has proven in decades and decades of doing those things is that if you believe you are taking something that will heal something, a
Hmm.
percentage of people will get healed.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And they've been sued for making migraine Tylenol versus like PMS Tylenol versus like fell off my mountain bike Tylenol, even though the data says that for a percentage of humans, knowing that this drug, even though it's the same one, but
Yep.
that the label says it's meant for my migraine, will heal me better. So if you take that into actual recruiting and you say, look, if we have a bias towards people who went to Harvard and we put them in a job and then we hire that side person who didn't go to Harvard as our test case, are they treated differently?
Yes.
And if so, does the way that they're treated, the expectation, cause them to perform differently? Yes.
Absolutely.
And if that's true, the whole thing's fricked up. Like
Right.
this because us humans aren't that simple. I think on the LLM side and on the AI side, the challenge and why you've got Workday being sued or whatever is the same but different problems existed before. It was just easier to be like, look, we have 100 managers. You want to talk to each one and hear their confirmed bias about how they make decisions about culture fit and why somebody's better than the other or whatever. And that's very hard to pin down as a systemic problem that we can sue and extract money from. But now we've just got one boogeyman, AI, and we can point all the class action against it. And that's honestly, I don't know that AI is better or worse. I think it's just different. It has its own bias. It also has confirmation bias built into it. What I mean by that is like, let's take have because you're from College Recruiter. Let's go with that.
Hmm.
My kid
Sure.
asked me the other day, should I go to college? And my answer was 100%. Like, go get a degree. I
Hmm.
wouldn't be super picky about what the degree is in,
Right.
although the number one predictor of success is anything related to math. Like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
mathematical business degree like accounting has a higher chance of you doing that job and getting paid more than a non-mathematical communications major.
Yeah.
Just for the data.
If we define success as how big is your paycheck,
Yeah,
um,
right.
then then
100%.
absolutely. Yep.
But
Engineering more quote unquote successful than Russian literature.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Doesn't mean you're happier, and that's another way of measuring success.
Doesn't mean
But
you're happier.
yeah.
It doesn't mean you're working in the job that you studied for. It doesn't mean any of that stuff.
Right.
And you can make the argument about, well, they taught you how to learn and whatever. No, they taught you how to take tests and turn in homework and get the right answer.
Hmm.
But the real reason I tell people to go to college is I go, who's going to be your boss? Who's going to decide if you get a job? And if your boss is going to have a degree, then they're going to hire people or give bias towards people with degrees because it confirms that they made confirmation bias. It confirms that they made the right decision going to college, and they don't want to reward people that took a shortcut in their mind and got around the system. That is going to be there for a generation. Like it's going to replicate itself for a while. Now it may go
Oh,
away,
yeah.
but if you don't get a college degree, you better go find a job or an organization that is ran by misfits and by people who are like contrarians and by rebels who reward people who rebel, people who break the mold, people who go against the system. But this idea that, well, college degrees are less valuable, they're still valuable in the eyes of people who spend 100 grand to get a college degree. And those people decide whether you should be hired or not. They decide whether you'll get promoted or not. They decide whether your question or answer in a boardroom is value. I remember the day that I finished my MBA, the people around me changed the way they looked at me, and I'm like, that was super easy for me. There's like nothing changed. I'm not a different person today versus last week, but I now
Hmm.
have this piece of paper that confirms a bias in their head
Hmm.
that it means something.
I've heard yeah, I totally agree. And just to expand on what you're saying, I've heard over and over and over again that the fact that somebody has a degree, associate's, bachelor's, master's, PhD, whatever, is an indicator that they're a hard worker, that they take their career more seriously, that they invest in themselves. I challenge those people to sit in a classroom and go to college for a year, 2 years, 4 years, whatever it may be, and then also do the same thing in the kitchen of a fast food restaurant. You can't tell me that somebody who works in a fast food restaurant for a year or 2 years or 4 years isn't a hard worker, isn't investing in themselves, isn't it's it is the I went through that path. And if I find out that you can do my job without having gone through that same path, it somehow undermines or minimizes what I've done. I think my degree is important, and therefore you should have it too.
Hmm.
And in certain professions, it's absolutely necessary, right? You want to be an engineer, you have to have an engineering degree. And we can have another argument about whether that should actually be a thing or not. Do you really need to have a degree to be a hairstylist? To You can code software all day long and not have an engineering degree As soon as you want to start designing an elevator shaft, you need an engineering degree. Is there really that much of a difference between the two of them? The
Right.
person who writes the software for the elevator versus the person who decides how much concrete to pour for the elevator shaft? Are those all that different? Um, do lawyers really need to have a law degree from an accredited law school? Again, a different discussion. But if you want to go and work at a law firm, and that law firm is dominated by Ivy League graduates, and you aren't an Ivy Leaguer, you are going to be pushing a boulder up a hill.
100%.
And Amazon was criticized. I think this is going back probably 4 or 5 years ago now, where they were one of the first big companies to not only to bring in AI into the hiring system in terms of evaluating candidates, but also to admit it.
Mhm.
And they didn't get nearly enough kudos for being public about it. And they pulled the plug on their experiment because lo and behold, the developers that they were using the AI system to hire for, the developers were almost all male. And they almost all went to the same small group of schools. So when Amazon basically fed into its system, here are the people that we have, here are the people who are productive. Hey, AI, go out and find us more that are like this. Surprise, surprise, the AI said, well, what do they have in common? Most of them went to these 20 or 25 schools, so we're going to up the score on those ones and we're going to down the score on others. And they're also all a bunch of white males, right, with names like Kenneth. And
Mhm.
so, if you are, a black female who went to an HBCU, and your name is like LaQuisha, or something that
Right.
none of the Amazon white male employees had a name like that, the AI was going to infer that you were not as good of a candidate. And Amazon, to its credit, pulled the plug on that.
Right.
I see very, very similar hiring algorithms being used today by other companies, and you rarely hear them being called out. But the Mobley versus Workday lawsuit, which isn't really about Workday,
Mhm.
they're the named defendant, but
Right.
we're probably only weeks or maybe a few months away from seeing the who's who of the Fortune 1000 on that list. I won't be surprised if we see 100 or 200 co-defendants that are New York Stock Exchange listed companies that are going to be just as liable as Workday because they were using Workday. It's no different in my mind than if they were using a staffing company whose main job was to screen out black candidates.
Right.
You can't shift your liability over to the staffing company and have the staffing company engage in discriminatory hiring practices. And I think that's what the tech world and those who buy from the tech world are discovering. And boy, do I see a lot of people very nervous about it because they
Yeah.
knew what they were doing. Like, there's no doubt they knew that there was bias in this system, like you said, Ryan. There's bias with people, there's bias with tech, but it doesn't make it right.
Yeah, well, and more importantly, and this is where, so I want to kind of talk about two topics as we finish this up. One, like the future of hiring, and two, like why I believe the number one, and you can fill in the blank for anybody, but I'm assuming you're in HR or something if you're listening to this, why I think you should
Or
be,
you have entirely too much time on your
yeah,
hands.
you should be spending your time playing with ChatGPT and understanding it. And my
Yeah.
reasoning is because you shouldn't be handing over the keys to the car to some random tech company and going, well, this is a tech thing and I'm not a tech person, so therefore they know their stuff. Like
Yeah.
the most powerful thing in the last two, like honestly, the last 5 decades, since I like went to school that has come out is ChatGPT.
Mm,
Love it or hate it, better or worse, it is the most powerful thing. And it's not just as powerful because of what it can do. It's powerful because of who can do it with it. Anybody. Like
mm,
a 10-year-old can get into ChatGPT and given enough iterations with it and enough curiosity of not using it at its minimum, but using it at its maximum capacity could fake somebody into thinking that they could perform brain surgery, right? It has
Yep.
massive amount of capacity of being able to do something, being able to do almost anything. But where it gets missed is that capacity of extreme usage has as much to do with the user learning how to use it effectively and what it can and can't do and experimenting and testing as it does the LLM. But we're so focused on Grok versus ChatGPT 5 versus ChatGPT 4 instead of going, hey, you're asking a random question, you never ask a follow up, you aren't actually experimenting with this thing to figure out what it can and can't do and how it does and doesn't work. That when some new AI screener comes out, you're like, this is so cool, it's AI. Don't know what that means because I haven't actually experimented with it enough past like, hey, can you rewrite this email to my boss to make me not a jerk? Like that's the extent of that usage. And so I think on that one hand, if you want to know what the future is going to look like, you need to view ChatGPT not as a tool you use, but as a tool that you create with. That it's about you expanding your ability to create an algorithm. So if you're sitting here going, oh man, I hate that that's how it's doing, it has bias in it. Cool, HR. So go get in ChatGPT and mess with it enough time to get it to not be biased towards that. Because you could. You could feed it a different data set. You could give it different instructions. You could try to get it to spit out whatever else comes, but you can't do it if you don't try. So that's kind of my
Yeah.
first one. That usage thing, I think,
Hmm.
is the real weak point for most people that they're just using it like they use Google.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're just saying, if you go to ChatGPT and you're going to be traveling to Nashville and you're going to like, give me a list of some good restaurants in Nashville. I really like barbecue and I really hate, pho,
Mm-hmm.
right? ChatGPT can give you some results and we can have some honest discussions where you disagree with the list and I think it's a great list and whatever. And at the end of the day, who cares?
Right.
Because you go to one restaurant versus another restaurant. You're not inflicting harm on somebody. There's no like law that you're breaking if you
Mm-hmm.
happen to go to a less than ideal restaurant. Who
Right.
cares? But the use of technology in hiring without eliminating that bad bias, as you called it, or at least working really, really hard to minimize it. The fearful thing of tech is that it scales it. So if you've got an existing problem and it's 1973, that problem is probably pretty small. Yes, it's having a terrible impact on people, but it might only be dozens or hundreds of people. You flash forward to 2025 and you have that same process augmented by some kind of automation, easy to be inflicting that harm on tens or even hundreds of thousands of people.
Right.
And it's if you're a tech vendor, particularly a tech vendor salesperson, you really don't care about what happens a year from now or 2 years from now. What you care about is that you need to make your quota this month so that you don't get let go. And it'd be awfully nice to have a big commission check next month. And so you're going to gloss over the bad parts. You probably don't even really want to know about the bad parts when you're talking to the HR customer. And you're going to focus on things like efficiency, how many more resumes they can process, how many fewer applicants they have to interact with so you can spend more time with the good ones. All that stuff makes a ton of sense. But don't rely on the tech vendor to do your due diligence. There are plenty of really good organizations and people out there that will evaluate and analysts and that they'll tell you like here are the pros and cons of each system. And the tech vendors, the good ones, embrace that. It's like, oh hell, if you can be recommended to our product by such and such an analyst, that's awesome. I mean, basically, the sale is in the bag if they
Mm-hmm.
can do that. The ones that don't want you talking to those analysts, you got to ask yourself why.
Right. On the other hand, those analysts have also not hired in the last decade.
Well, some of them have,
So also make sure
but
that when
not.
you look at that,
Yeah.
that you're looking at that piece. Because what's always interesting is the big questions that I want to know. Somebody brings that same piece of tech in, you're giving it to me. I'm like, show me the prompt. Like
Mm,
underlying this easy user interface is a prompt that you're sending to the LLM. Number one. Number two, a knowledge base. Did you
hmm
feed it a set of data? Did you feed it like knowledge, or are you just relying on its knowledge? And
hmm
is some type of output structure? How are you outputting this? And I know that because that's what a normal GBT has. It has a
hmm
knowledge base. Am I pointing at just the open world of knowledge or at this one document? And what is my prompt? And what is my output structure? If it's a decision criteria, if it's a scoring report, that thing, the AI guys will want to say, no, 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 like it's way more complicated. Nah, bullshit. That's what the underlying tool is when you build a feature on an LLM. So ask them that. And then be prepared to actually go, okay, now let me take this. What you want isn't just an analyst, you want a devil's advocate who knows enough to be super dangerous. That goes, wait a second, so how could this go wrong? How would this be bad? Oh, well, we gave it this data set. Well, did that data set have 3 decades of bias towards white males in sales?
Right.
Well, no, it just has all the people who've been successful in sales. Oh, so the people who've been
So the answer
successful
to the
at
first
being in
question was
sales
actually yes.
were white males with college degrees who reported to other white males who created a bro culture. Okay,
Right.
so what you're saying is systemically we created a situation where white males did great selling HR tech, and you've taken and built that into a system that replicates that. That's awesome. Well, at Applicant Pro, I have a bunch of moms with no sales experience that outsold everybody else.
Right.
So it broke your bias, which means it's just not that simple. But you're creating a system using confirmation bias. It's confirming the bias we already had in the system. The problem is that's really hard to fix because then you're going to get in trouble on the opposite side of going, so we built a system that broke the bias. Well, that means you gave it a new bias, right? Well, yeah, we biased it against white males. Oh, now the world's going to melt down because in order to break the bias that's systemic, you have to put extra weight against it, which is utterly offensive. And the reason why
hmm
is because it's complicated. It's
Yeah.
just complicated.
Yeah, Google ran into that with Gemini with the image creation and when that first
Uh-huh.
rolled out. I think it was like maybe mid 2024, something like that. And when you ask Gemini to create images of historical as figures, the signing of the Declaration of Independence, top Nazis, whatever, it inserted women, it inserted people who were black, etc. Well, I can tell you that there were no women at the top of the Nazi leadership. There were
Right.
no women, as I said in Hamilton, in the room where it happened with the
Right.
signing of the Declaration of Independence. There were no blacks involved. But Gemini, in Google's attempt to remove bias, right? I think that the thought was good, the execution was terrible. Um, they created another bias problem.
Right.
And would it have been better to have women and black people involved in the signing of Declaration of Independence? Not so much the Nazi Party,
Right.
absolutely. Were there? Absolutely not. So let's not
Yeah.
rewrite history. Something can be really bad and look really awful, but also be really accurate. And we need to look
100%.
at that too.
So now I just want to end
Yeah.
on this last thought
Yeah.
because this is where I think the real problem is going to be.
Hmm.
I believe the real problem in the next, we'll go with 3 to 5 years. So if you listen
Okay.
5 years from now, come back, check me on this one. Is that what made people successful doing a job is not going to be what makes them successful doing the job in the future. What I mean by that is if what made you successful doing sales was conformity to I got a degree because it's what I was supposed to do, and I got all the right answers because that's what the teacher asked me to do, and I went to Harvard, which means my education's done. Now I get to go reap the rewards of having done that by just kind of iterating my knowledge 1% a long time. I don't have to go back to school because I went to school. And then along comes AI and a new economy and a different like like a different social structure and a different competitive structure and a different power structure and maybe a whole new world that looks different. We're living on Mars, and the world isn't what the world was before. So now we want to hire somebody who does well in chaos, who does
Mm.
well outside the box, who does well when the mold, not by breaking the mold, but the mold was broken. How do you now predict that? Because that's going to be, I believe, what it looks like in 5 years is all of these jobs are going to be like, I don't know whether AI is going to do them for you, do them with you, whatever. I just know they're going to be different. So now what?
It, yeah, it, I, I, I love history, and I'm listening to this podcast called The Age of Napoleon, and it's not totally about Napoleon, but it's basically like late 1700s to early 1800s. The world turned upside down over about 5 decades. And he
Mm-hmm.
just happened to be a leading actor in that in Western Europe, where, where we get so much of our media and history. They were equally as interesting people, I'm sure, in Southeast Asia. We in America don't hear about them nearly as much.
All right.
But, there was that. There was like Industrial Revolution, which kind of came on the heels of that. There was the mechanization of warfare, kind of think World War One. All of these changes took many decades. And I think one of the things that we're struggling with as a society right now is that we have similar changes going on. I think we're in the eye of the hurricane right now, but all of this is going to take many years, not many decades. So when you said 5 years, I think we're in the midst of change that would have taken 30, 40, 50 years
Yeah.
for our great great grandparents' generations, but now are happening in 5 years. We as humans are not well suited to this pace of change. We look for stability, we look for things we understand, for things that were true yesterday, and so therefore we want them to be true today. And when change takes 30 years, it's very incremental, it's very slow. When things change like that massively in 3 to 5 years, I don't think we're equipped. There are a lot of people who are very stressed out there on the HR side, on the candidate side, and I don't blame them. They should be. If they weren't stressed, I'd actually be more concerned about them.
Yeah, I think it's said in all that if you actually get in real AI circles that have reality, right, not the hype cycle, you will hear pretty consistently we overestimate the change that can happen in 1 to 2 years, and we dramatically underestimate what can change in 10 years. And
Hmm.
any MIT researcher, anybody like that will say that pretty consistently. Hey, anybody who tells you that recruiting is going to be totally different in 2 years is dramatically overestimating the actual change. And the reason is the technology could change that fast, but humans don't. Like there is
Yeah.
systemic process in place. If the technology guys had their way, all you humans would be out of the way, and we really could change that fast. But technology being capable of doing something is very different in 2 years than technology actually working its way through the. I know big corporations that last week got approved for their team to use ChatGPT. It's been out 2 years,
Hmm.
right? Like, so systemically, there is systemic drag to
Hmm.
adoption of technology, whether that's red tape, whether it's fear, whether it's going along with the status quo, whatever. But 10 years from now, the world might actually be unrecognizable. I don't think I'll tell you my prediction. I don't believe I'll have a keyboard. I believe that I'll be talking to my technology all day long. I think you'll have cubicles of people with screens, no keyboards, using their talking to be like, no, move that over here. No, do this over here. No, rewrite that. No, I hate add some extra line spacing in this. I know because that's how I would do it now. But I think you're exactly right. We are condensing the world tipped upside down. Like the resistor or the what is it, microprocessor in that the change of
Hmm.
every 18 months, Moore's law, that it would
Yeah.
replicate like that. Like that did go that fast, but adoption of those changes was slower.
Yeah.
The actual application of them was slower. But yeah, I think if you're not freaked out, I believe what we're going to see is something we haven't seen before, and you're starting to see it right now, which is normally you see economic hardship that leads to unemployment. The economy slows down, businesses don't make as much money, and you have high unemployment. And those two things, they kind of like are inverse. Like the businesses are struggling to make money and unemployment goes up, right? And then when businesses are making a lot of money, unemployment goes down because they hire people because we are a labor arbitrage society. We use labor to make money, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
What happens though when business success is high, profits are high, and unemployment's high? And that's something I don't think that we have recognized and seen in the past of what happens when all these Fortune 500 companies are making crazy money and we have 10% white collar unemployment or 15% knowledge worker unemployment. We haven't seen a big giant economy where businesses can make gobs of cash without labor arbitrage, with AI arbitrage, AI knowledge arbitrage. And that I think you should be freaked out about. You should be going, holy crap, like that's a recipe for social unrest. It's a
Hmm.
recipe for people having to rethink their career paths and what they even think a career is. It's a recipe for massive, massive disruption. Though I think I hadn't heard that on the Napoleon thing. The world tipped upside down. But I think that's what it looks like in 10 years of going, whoa, all these knowledge workers we replaced.
Yeah, and it'll be easier to see it in the rearview mirror. You know, when
100%. You'll be
when
able to
you're
connect all the
you,
dots looking back.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, it's hard to appreciate that the turmoil, the storm that you're in until that storm has passed, and then and you can see that your roof has been ripped off. You
So
probably
this
don't
is
know
a
it at the
great
time.
negative way to end this podcast. So what would you do if it was you? Because clearly, like,
Yeah.
I think if you're in your mid to late 50s, if you're nearing that end of retire where you're going to retire, I think for the most part, you can look at that and be like, man, 5 years from now, I'm going to wipe my brow and be like, phew, so glad I retired in time.
Yes. Yes.
But if you're 40 or 30,
Yeah.
like you're going through this. So what's maybe like your two or three tips?
I wish I had really good answers. I mean, just to be candid, one thing is, and I think we sort of indirectly addressed this, Ryan, is that critical thinking skills are just very, very paramount. And so if you're the kind of person who goes to work every day and just sort of expects what to be told, you're kind of a cog in a machine, I would really be working hard to change that and to start to be questioning, not in an abrasive, divisive manner like the word that we used at the beginning of the recording, but in is there a better way of getting this done? Should I be going to my boss and saying, hey, I think I can be more productive if we do this? I would really encourage that kind of behavior. Another one is to shorten time horizons. I wouldn't be going, if I was 40, I wouldn't have any illusions that I'm going to be at that same employer until a day I retire. Even if that was the norm in that company, even if it still is that, I would be ready for change. Even just small things like keep your LinkedIn updated, keep your resume updated, regularly network, just planting seeds because you don't want to try to harvest a crop if you haven't been planting seeds. So get that done. Um, and it doesn't suit everybody. Some of us are just sort of more naturally predisposed to it than others, but be as good with tech as you can be. Don't resist it, embrace it. I do think we're seeing story after story after story coming out from employers of this person was let go versus the other person. The people who tend to let go, loads of exceptions to this, but the people who tend to get let go are the ones that employers project are going to be the least productive over the coming years. And some of that just means, are you open to using new technology? Do you embrace it? Or are you the kind of person who comes to work every day with kind of a bureaucratic attitude? And it's like, no, I'm not going to use ChatGPT because I've been doing this job for 12 years and I know how to do it. And so therefore, I'm not going to change. Well, guess what? Maybe you're not going to change. Maybe the tools you've been using aren't going to change, but the world is changing around you.
Hmm.
And those tools may not be any good anymore. You may not be well suited to that job anymore because maybe there are five of you and that employer is only going to hire or keep one. Try to be the one.
Yeah. I love it. I actually, my three are the same three you got. I'll just restate them in a different way. But at the top of the food chain, which was your number one was oh crap. Shorten your time horizon was number two. Embrace technology.
Critical
Oh,
thinking.
critical thinking. So,
Yeah.
um, I agree. Depending, you need to know the room, right? So know the room, whether it's okay to be the contrarian, divisive person or not. That said, like record your meetings, put them in ChatGPT, and go
Mm.
engage with ChatGPT and be like, hey, here's the backstory of our company. Here's the decisions we've made. Here's what we do. Here's the last 20 meetings I've been in. Hey, can you help me game theory this out? There's a bunch of keywords. Learn keywords that you can give ChatGPT that trigger it to act in certain ways. Hey, I want you to be the devil's advocate here. Hey, instead of asking for the right answer, what should we do? Ask, what are the options? What are the pros and cons? And what are the probabilities? When you ask for a definitive answer, it rewards you by giving you back a definitive answer. Don't
As
ask,
if there was only
yeah,
one answer.
don't ask questions for right answers. Ask questions for what are the options? What are the pros or cons? What is game this out? What's likely to happen? Like, make that your best friend and then come back with a refined, like, now what question should I, and this is where I'd end that top set. What question should I ask to help us know which one's the right answer? Because you'll find that instead of pushing back and saying that's wrong, that won't work, whatever, come back with thoughtful, thought-provoking questions that open up the discussion around, hey, so there's probably more than one right answer here. We're looking for the best answer, not the right answer. The best answer given where we're at, given the situation, given where we're going. And so I'm curious, I have a few questions I'd like to ask. Why have we thought about this versus that? Have we thought about the unintended consequences of this? What blind spots did this open up? But literally, the receptionist, the brand new worker, could snag the Otter transcript from a meeting or drop their phone on the table with Otter and throw it in and say, "Hey, ChatGPT, game theory this out and give me be the contrarian here." Like what's the downside of this? What are the pros and cons? What are all the options? What are the possibilities here? You will find that will mess. And even if you never show it to anybody and you never bring it up because you don't want to rock the boat, that's fine. Don't rock the boat. But at home, you should be rocking the boat inside of ChatGPT because it will build this ability to see that it's not a one and zero. It's not a yes or no. This is not black and white. We live in all the gray area. This is not how the world works. There's no right answers. I think on your second one, the like, I would definitely say, especially networking.
Hmm.
Like, LinkedIn is not a place to announce you got laid off and then announce you got a new job and then go away for 5 years.
Right.
That's not like you're not nobody gives a crap that like yes, oh, I'm sorry you got laid off. You haven't posted ever. You're
Yeah.
not actually getting a lot of value from that. So if you're going to use LinkedIn, but I would even say even physical networking, go find a co-working space. Go hang out there 1 day a week, even if it's after work hours. Start getting around people who are working who aren't your coworkers
Hmm.
so that you start building up these connections. For me, it's pickleball. Surprisingly enough, if you're young, there's older people there, there's more accomplished people there. I'm almost always playing with somebody older than me to start building my network. But co-working, by far, go find a WeWork, go hang out there where people are working at snack time that you can build your network and start stacking up those connections because nobody wants to hear it, but your one way to defeat AI when applying for a job is to be an employee referral.
Yep.
100%. Number one way, opt out of the AI by being an employee referral. The last part of like the shorten up the time horizon, I think you need to do that period. Like if you're in college right now, just assume you're not going to have a career. You're going to have 3 or 4 careers. You're writing a book
Hmm.
of chapters and sections, and you're writing 3 or 4 different stories of your life.
Right. Not jobs,
Yeah.
careers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
each
and so
career might have multiple jobs.
yeah, and if you think about in that way, then you start realizing, okay, college isn't the end of my education. Every time I jump a new career, there's going to be a learning curve. There's going to be a required me learning how to do it. And so I need to get really great at learning new stuff to the point of implementation of it. Like if you want the one skill to learn, new stuff to the point of successful implementation of whatever that is. Like that's for me, I believe that's like one of my masters. Like I'm great at learning something new to the point of implementing. You could
Mm.
give me literally anything. Like when we started this before the recording, like I was watching a doctor give somebody stitches because I'm really great. I'm just curious. Okay, why are they doing that? How do they do that? Interesting. Could I replicate that, do that? Probably need some practice. And if I gave a crap, I would go spend 40 hours and I would be good enough to
Mhm.
decide whether I needed to use that skill. But that of when you shrink it down into these boxes, the number one way to be unhappy is to expect a different outcome than you get. So let's be realistic about the outcomes. You're going to have multiple careers. And if
Mhm.
you're 40 right now, it's not just you're not going to be at that same employer in 10 years. You may not even be in that same career in 10 years.
Mhm.
And if that freaks you out, like take the weekend, freak out, cry, go through your stages of grief, and get to the point where you're like, and so I am going to figure out what my other options would be. I'm going to start building up the contacts, who I know in that space, and what I can actually do so that I'm ready for it. So it's not a surprise. So
Mhm.
it's not a, oh, I got left behind and now it's too late. Like that technology piece, if you go look back to, let's say, go back to like 2000, that gap period between 2000 and 2010,
Mhm.
go find anybody who came out the other side of that at a tech company, as a founder of a tech company, as any in that tech space, and ask them what they did between the late 90s and the late 2000s, and you're going to hear a pretty consistent story of like, so I started selling stuff on eBay. So I started building websites. So I started, and it's not that they studied engineering or programming. I didn't. I'm not a programmer. But almost all of us in that phase, along with being an accountant, sold stuff on eBay, built
Mhm.
websites, did web marketing.
Mhm.
And if you go look at all these successful people who are running these companies now that made millions of dollars and whatever, you'll find a consistent group of people that took their side hustle that had nothing to do with what they'd studied in college and nothing to do with their job and side hustled their way into being in the room where all this stuff was happening. And that's what you should be doing with ChatGPT right now is saying, yeah, I know I'm an accountant, but also, hey, instead of when you say, oh, it can never be as good as me, instead say, I'm going to go figure out how to make it better than me.
Mhm.
Because that's the skill that people are going to want to see is no, that accountant, he knows how he swallowed his pride that AI will never
Mhm.
be as good as him and instead said, hey, I figured out how to make it better than me. I figured out where it was bumping up against its limitations and I built for that. Those people I think in 10 years you're going to see will be that next round of innovators who are like, yeah, I wasn't as smart as me, so I made it smarter. So
Which in turn makes you better.
which in turn makes you better. And
Yeah.
that's what your boss wants to hear. And when you walk
Yeah.
into an interview, you're like, look, like if I was walking into an interview right now as an accountant, I'd be saying, look, I know AI is coming. I know all the other accountants are saying it will never be as good as them. But here's what I've been working on to figure out how me plus it is better than them. Here's its
Mhm.
limitations, and here's how I'm working around them. You will get a job by any company that exists in the future. You may not get a job at old school companies, but they're also not going to exist in the future. And so, but you will get those jobs because that's really what we want to hear is somebody going, and so I'm figuring out how to fix it. So, Stephen, always a great time.
This is fun, Ryan.
Yeah, 100%. Hey, thanks, Ton.
Okay, that was a lot. Stephen always brings the real talk about what's actually happening in HR tech versus what we're being told is happening. Here's what I want you to walk away with. First, stop arguing about whether AI is screening candidates or not. It is. The question is how well it's doing it and whether you understand what's really happening in your own systems. Second, Stephen's 3 survival tips are gold. Embrace technology, develop critical thinking skills, and shorten your time horizons. Don't expect to have the same job or even the same career for the next 10 years. And third, this one's huge. If you want to understand the future of AI at work, stop using ChatGPT like it's Google. Start using it like it's a tool you're building with. Record your meetings, throw them into ChatGPT, ask it to be the devil's advocate. Learn to create algorithms, not just consume answers. The people who figure out how to make AI better than them, instead of competing with it, are going to be the next round of innovators. Don't be the accountant saying, it'll never be as good as me. Be the accountant saying, I figured out how to make it better than me. If this episode made you think differently about AI and hiring, share it with someone in HR who needs to hear this reality check. Thanks for listening to The Future of Work with AI.